Hello, welcome to another edition of Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 165 for September 27, 2024. It's Open Lines Friday, and that just means we talk about anything you want to talk about. I've got a few things prepared, but hopefully the conversation will be driven by you. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantain App, and we have a quorum, so we will proceed. This is an event we do every Friday, 10 a.m. Central Time, get together and talk about low code in general, Plantain App coding in specific, talk about the challenges we experience and try and get problems solved. We record all of these, put them out on YouTube. So if you go out to youtube.com/plantainapp, you can find the Low Code Campfire playlist. We run a agenda that looks something like this, where we always say hello, and if you're new to the group, that you introduce yourself. Other than that, we go around the campfire, and we always start with first call, and then beyond that, we talk about where we have a number of other things that we can draw on into. We chat for an hour or so, but then after that, we go into our afterglow segment. That's where we turn the recording off and hang out with each other for a few more minutes. So please do engage with us. You can submit questions and topics in advance on this QR code, or you can send an email to support@plantainapp.com. Hello, all.
Good
Hello,
morning,
everyone.
Dale. Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
Hi, Jen.
I was a couple minutes late, but I'm here.
I'm just glad we reached a quorum. It's hard to do a conversation all by myself. So I was looking at my watch trying to figure out what we were going to do. So did anybody come with something that they wanted to talk about first?
Well, I keep forgetting that I want to come to these because I just get busy. So that's kind of why I'm here. But also, I just wanted to tell you, Dale, that I did the Zoom API with meetings. It was actually your webinar thing
Yes.
that's in the Campfire, and it works exactly the same. It's perfect. The only thing that was a little tweak, if people wanted to know, was that you have to make the meeting a recurring meeting, and then even if it's only one time. Otherwise, the JSON doesn't have the occurrences, like they don't have that in the output, which is funny because it's required by Zoom. But anyway, it worked out really slick, so I appreciate it. It was great. It was almost like copy paste.
Oh, nice. Well, that's what we're aiming for, to just have these, stack of techniques that you can just implement it. And um, every now and then I get frustrated by maybe an obstacle. We have the the ghost stories, the things that we chase for an hour trying to get them to work right, and yet how much you can get done through low code if you were to compare it to other solutions. There's just an amazing amount. So thanks for that reminder.
Yeah, what I appreciate the low code is it's really not low code, it's like tiered code because you can go as in-depth as you want. But what I love about it is it keeps me organized because, just the structure of it, where things are. And once you learn that structure and it's replicated over and over again, the interface looks very similar. Because if I, used to doing my own stuff, I would comment a lot and it'd still be hard to find what you were trying to look for. So I actually really appreciate the structure.
Nice. Thank you. All right.
Follow up.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry. No, to follow up Jen's comment, very similar to the kind of cut and paste notion. I took your history table maintenance from Campfire apps, and I've implemented it on a couple of different instances and a couple of minor tweaks to it. And well, first of all, the essence of it worked right out of the box, so to speak. So that was great. When then I had just decided to make a couple of tweaks to it, and it's, as they say, cooking with gas. So it's very, very helpful.
So this is the one where you put an automation that triggers on a database change, and
no, well, sorry, go ahead.
no, it sounds like it's a different one. So,
This one is the nightly routine to clean up things like history tables and so on.
good. Yes. Yep.
And it just, like I said, cut and paste pretty much, and it worked. So very happy with that. And I think it's very useful and keep the sites in tune. I guess a question is, I know you've got it set at 30 days. How, how tight can you run that without getting yourself into trouble in terms of keeping history tables? And also, are there other kind of optional history tables that perhaps maybe should be looked at?
So those are all good questions. Let's dive in a little bit on this one. So this is an automation, and I think this goes back to Jen's comment about patterns, that when you understand the pattern of what you can do with automation, then doing a daily history maintenance 30 days thing isn't that hard to do. You understand exactly where to put it, or if you're trying to hunt it down, you're looking for an automation because of the pattern anyway. So then what we did is a pretty straightforward job here that says that title says we're going to keep it for 30 days. It's running every day of the week. And so the first thing we do is just have a variable here to say we want to keep everything for 30 days, and that lets us use that, reuse this in a variety of SQL statements. So we have a delete from this audit table that just accumulates history that you may not need, and we're using days to keep the variable, so 30 days. And then we repeated that on a number of databases. So it's running SQL statements that just delete things out. And so to your first question, how tightly can you run this? It's really dependent on you, right? None of these things are required to keep the system operational. So but they are good to leave tracks in case you want to do research. So, for example, talking about the event log is probably a good one. This is saying if the event log ends up having errors from anything along, either you can send things to the event log, but more traditionally, if our apps or anything on your DNN system throws an error, it goes into the event log. So if you get real aggressive with this and delete everything after one day or delete everything every day, you just don't have a record of errors. It doesn't hurt your system to run that way, but if things go wrong, you don't have a history. So how long do you want to keep? It's how much do you want to know?
So I guess the more or less the opposite view in a sense. What's the best way? Which ones will affect the performance of the system and site most greatly? And how, like I said, how tight should you run that? In other words, does the event log impact overall, over time, assuming it grows and so on and so forth, does that impact overall system performance, or are there others that need to keep an eye on, things like that? Or are they somewhat irrelevant?
So others may have more information than I do about whether, for example, having many records slows things down. And it may depend on what you're doing with it. But the main impact that I see on support is that if you don't truncate these things, your databases can get very large. So if you're, for example, on the API thing, if you're have a lot of API calls and it's putting a lot of data out there and you don't realize it, or you're leaving schedule history undeleted, that your database ends up getting bloated, and so it takes longer to back up, and can eventually could result in a disk full, which are very annoying. Nothing works the way you want it to when the disk gets full. So that's the performance thing that I see. From a pure SQL standpoint, if you let the event log grow or the schedule history grow and you're not inquiring against it, it doesn't slow down your system at all. But if you let the schedule history, which is here in automation, so if you leave the schedule history growing and you click over to the history tab, the time it takes to load this is going to be slow and resource intensive to go gather that information when there's a million records. So are you inquiring against it or not is part of the equation of whether or not it's slowing you down. So again, the big thing that I see is disk space, and for no apparent purpose, right? Unless you have high audit requirements, having the fact that a job ran a year ago is probably not going to do you much good. And so getting rid of it is worthwhile. What's your window for research? Anyone else encounter things along this way? I think another so the other piece to your question is are there other places that you should be looking? From a database table standpoint, I have run queries before to say, show me how many records are in all of my tables, and then I compare that to what I think is reasonable. And so, and of course, just like any other time you're looking for space, it's you go to where the most use is, right? Because so you can be effective with your time. So if you see a table with 1 million rows, you ask yourself, well, does this okay, this is customer data, I need to keep it, move on. But if you don't know what it is, that's the place to go looking to say, sure, well, is this transactional that I don't need? So finding a query like that, or getting your AI intern to write a query that returns all your database table sizes might reveal something in your instance that would be worth clearing up.
Roger, thank you. I do have another topic if you're so inclined. So this is a bit of a ghost story and a discussion. So what happened is I have an Excel spreadsheet where disparate users, quote unquote, project administrators can import records, users into the system for their particular project that they're doing. And it's not a straight import, actually, it's quite involved, and it does a bunch of things, but at the heart of it, it's getting users that are not in the system in the system. Okay. So using the Excel spreadsheet import and so on and so forth works great, and then suddenly it just started to fail. And it was a bit of a head scratcher, but as it turned out, the records themselves were coming in, or the email addresses, which I also use as the username, were coming in with spaces appended at the end, like 2 spaces. And the import process was working, but the follow-on processes were not, because, and this I'm still in the process of really figuring this out, but it appears that an email, usernames are okay, don't care about spaces because it's a lot more forgiving. But when you use the email, if it has spaces at the end, it actually, in my case at least, causes the import routine to add new users to fail. So I'm in the process now of figuring out what the best approach to that is. And this is perhaps even a suggestion for a feature, and that would be to allow the ability to put a trim token. So for instance, just for an email address, you put a trim email address right in your import routine. And in this case, that would have taken care of, cleaned it up completely. And I was actually thinking of asking my assistant to help me write that. But that aside, what I also am doing kind of downstream from that is creating a temporary table before I do the final on everything. So what my thought is that in order to, first of all, the question is there a really good, slick way of doing things like handling import data that's bad, particularly in this case, spaces at the end of an email? That's a question. Back to you, Dale.
Well, so I think, I mean, you've identified a pretty classic problem with import. So you've got your source, and the question is, do you go directly, you know, you're importing from a source and sending it directly to a how you use it, versus importing it into something that you can check for errors, whatever kinds. In your case, it's spaces on emails, but in other cases, it could be data inconsistency, or just, I mean, when you're accepting import data, you never know what you're going to get from a user. I mean, it all depends on your scenario. But so inserting a step that is like auditing, editing, improving the data before you finally use it, and hopefully you can automate that. But that's the to me the big scope, right?
Yeah.
And you know, so if you can get semi-reliable data or mostly reliable data, I mean, if everything's always fine except for emails with spaces, then you can, you know, do just this kind of one-step process, and most of the time it works. Inserting that step in between, where you can run checking on it, lets you do things like create a report of all the records that fail. So now if I mean, the best case is you run an audit, everything's fine or it gets fixed automatically, and then you do the processing. But if it fails, you can come back with, well, you know, record 17 and record 83 are bad and need manual intervention before we proceed.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, this as is usual, when you run into a problem, it ultimately can tend to improve the entire process if you handle it correctly. So to your point, one of the things about putting a temporary table up front in it would be that I can then come back to the user before actually doing the import. I can then put a I can then put a summary to the user, like you said, you know, here, this is this is what I'm going to do. Is this good? Do we need to edit this and make any changes before I go ahead and add these things? So, but to direct answer, I think, is that there isn't anything that anybody is aware of that does a kind of a cleanse of incoming data, either at a token level. I know I can do it at SQL, which I will do, but in terms of inside the low code environment.
I was about to say, I think pending approval is the one you want.
So, you know, we've talked before on this call about our low code playbook, trying to come up with best practices for doing things. And so someone wrote up this internally, what are we supposed to be doing? And so this is all about the patterns for doing this. And this is a draft, right? So we haven't finalized it. I'd be happy to share this with you though, to the ideas. And so in this case, it's showing all the different things, all the different steps. So different things to think about in doing validation. Again, I'd be happy to share it with you and see if it would give you ideas. I'm going to ramble a little bit. I think there's a couple of different scenarios that are, one scenario is if you are defining the format that the Excel must be in, it must have these columns, they are in this order, or at least minimally they're there, then that even if they're there in a different order, then that gives you the ability to import from a spreadsheet and do a bulk insert into a temporary table and then begin to do that kind of processing. The various you can throw any number of checks at it that you want to. And then,
Right.
Another scenario, and I dealt with this one recently. I was dealing with a CSV file that it was like totally unknown. What columns am I going to get, and what data am I going to get? But I still want to be able to handle it, and I found a solution for that. But that is even a slower. Because you don't know what you're going to get, now you've got to have even more flexibility. And so maybe my scenario was, I know I'm going to get an email and an address, but there might be a lot of other columns that I want to carry forward for the user, but it's up to them what they provide. And so then that's even a harder thing. You still need to audit the columns that you care about, but being able to carry forward the ones that you don't even know are coming. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, to your point, I mean, the good news is that I have a structured spreadsheet that the user downloads and then just cuts and pastes. The problem is in the pasting. Where are they getting their data from, and what does it look like? So I've got it as tightly controlled as I think I can, but at the end of the day, there's still room for garbage or, inadvertent things like spaces and so on and so forth. So
and
hence,
just random, but I've seen this before too, that that if like they're copying out of Word or something HTML based, and so now you're getting a lot of HTML and maybe a lot of HTML in the content that is ugly too, that you have to, you want data, all they care about is, well, I can see the email address, but they don't realize it's bold and italicized and has classes associated with it. And,
correct.
So trimming that stuff out is a pain.
Yep. But like I said, ultimately, what I'm going to do essentially after this conversation was proceed ahead with moving the creation of the temp table ahead of the attempt to import the users. So create the temp table, clean it up, then import based on the clean version, which will resolve the problem. I just wasn't sure if there was a better, faster way to do it.
Yep. Patrick, any ideas that you want to throw into the mix?
Well, the one thing that's running through my mind as we're talking about all this is that we may be triggering a little bit of PTSD symptoms for Jen.
Sorry, Jen.
Because the data importing was a huge part of what Jen went through a couple of years ago, and it was challenging.
I was thinking similar.
So she could tell you all kinds of stories, and you know, I could too. But yeah, I think that that one thing that that we went through a lot of with her process, and in general, I think this is necessary, is that lots of lots of tests, like especially if it's going to be you know, a huge, you know, a very large import, or something that you're going to do on a regular basis, lots of testing to discover those kinds of things, like you discovered, Matt, first before you start doing the real thing, seems to, you know, that's going to always be helpful. And then also, of course, doing the doing an interim location where you can use that to for both cleanup and further manipulation.
Yep, makes sense.
And in our case, we were actually, it was a huge migration. So we were not afraid of changing the schema and structure because it made it better.
Yeah.
Even if it was more complicated, it in the beginning, if it made it better. So
Yeah, and some of those data structure changes that you made, it ultimately made the structure better, but the process of getting to that new structure was pretty complex in some cases.
Patrick, I was going to ask if you've used this action lately, import list in the database.
I've used it, but no, I haven't used it recently, no.
Yeah, because there's a couple of different directions you can do. If you have a, let's see, if you have a Excel, you can turn it into a list and maybe turn it into JSON, which then can be processed directly into SQL. The idea is if they're large, and maybe this is another piece of the puzzle, is it large data sets or is it 100 rows? If it's users, my guess is that it's not a big long
Yeah, it's not.
processing speed. Yeah, processing
It's
speed
not an issue. It's, you know, max 50 at a time or something like that.
Yep.
But so to this I've never used this before, import list into database. So this is essentially so you can create a list from Excel, let's say,
Yep.
and then that's this variety of list.
Correct. So then you could say that you want to put this into you'd have a temp, an entity
Yep.
that is a temp entity. And so you're going to take my Excel list and take everything and insert it. And so this should result in creating a bunch of records for you that you can then run other processes on. This is one way to do it. Or you can, again, you can do the SQL to push those in.
Yeah. Right now, what I didn't know this existed, but what I'm doing is just pushing it in via SQL.
Yep.
But,
and are you doing that like row by row?
No, it's a bulk.
A bulk, yeah.
The other thing that I discovered along the way in this process, which is very cool, was the extending a list. And so what I'm doing is you get the import from the user, but I don't know, for instance, which account they belong to, and a whole bunch of other variables like that, the project ID and so on and so forth. So I'm taking the import list and extending it out to add things like, the project ID, the customer ID, and a bunch of other things like that, which is very cool. And it works great.
Yep.
Cool.
So now I'm curious. Here's one I haven't seen before. So this is a dark corner, I guess. Wow. Have you seen? I don't remember this at all.
I've seen it, but I haven't used it. But yeah, that's I think that would be helpful.
This is not helpful to Matt's problem, not Matt's question, but rather, if you're trying to split up a list into different pieces, this could be.
Yeah.
What is a page?
So the question I have was, what is a page?
I think it's specified right there. So it's a number, it's a set of records from the total list. So the page size is it says the number of elements that will be selected from the source list. So I think that's elements is an odd word, but I would think that means the number of items, yeah, from the list.
So essentially a number of rows.
Yes. So
so I think that, like, if you were iterating a list and you wanted to handle it in chunks, that you would iterate each time you go through an iteration of the list, you would iterate the page, because it says the page is zero based, so it splits the entire. My guess is that it splits the entire list into pages based on your page size, and then the records are, page 0, page 1, page 2, and
so,
yeah.
So I'm going to try and say a use case. If you were importing 1,000 users, and each one of those ends up firing off an email, and maybe you don't want to fire off 1,000 emails all in one bulk. So, and maybe your process takes whatever you're doing might take, let's say it's a very involved process to onboard a user. So you've got this list of 1,000 that you're going to bring on. You could load a list of 1,000 users and start with page 0, which has the first 20 users, and then so now you run your onboarding process on the 20 users, and then it could go to whether you're going to iterate them all right then, or perhaps rest. I typically use a different pattern, which is to mark the ones that I've created so that I don't have to, I just keep working on the ones that haven't been marked. But this would be another way to pull out a subset and then process the subset. But I didn't even know it existed, so it's like, hey, look, something new. So it feels like if we didn't give you any direct answers, we gave you direction.
Yeah, and that was very helpful and pretty much a confirmation with the direction I was going to head. But before I went in and spent the man hours on it, I wanted to get your expert insight, which I appreciate.
I mean, short version is, if you don't build this step in between, then just anything that throws you off, anything that you haven't anticipated is going to blow up your process. You build a step in between that allows you to do checking any number of checks, and then when you encounter something new, you just throw in one more check into whatever your mix is, and then hopefully you get to a spot where you're checking all the normal things that go wrong, but you don't blow up when something new goes wrong. You've got your data in a temp table, you fix it, you reprocess it, life is good.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Good topic. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
I heard from you today. All right. We're still on first call, so there's an opportunity to jump in if you had something. Other than that, I'm going to do some mentions. All right. Going to talk a little bit about OpenID Connect. So just to mention that I'm tasked with getting some more documentation in place. OpenID Connect for Google will be coming soon, so hopefully I can report progress on that one of these days. We're on version 126. We're trying to figure out how to get 127 out the door, and that's an ongoing topic for our product team. But with 126, the main issue that we knew about that Matt had reported, drag and drop, that we released a solution for that. Have you happened to had a chance to install that yet, Matt?
Install the hotfix, have not re-implemented it yet. I had to do some workarounds while it wasn't available. So hopefully that'll be mid next week. I'll have that done.
Good. Other than that, 126 is, to my knowledge, very stable, and I don't think there's anything else I know of that would keep somebody from using it. So go do it so that you can get 127 one of these days. This 2 days ago, we did Low Code Cafe signing in with Google, and so if you haven't seen that, you should. It's a definitely fun way to spend an hour, right? Always tongue in cheek. It feels weird to invite people to come watch something I recorded, but anyway. Anybody see that? Anybody have any questions? Anybody?
Yes, I watched it with great interest. Again, especially considering my user problems, right? But so the question I have, I think you answered it, but just to confirm, if someone logs in using Google and thereby creates their account, they then, for that account, that's how they have to come in.
Yes.
So, yeah. So
Pretty much.
because
okay, there's like Patrick and I had a conversation about this afterwards. So just to set the stage, we have the new functionality here. This was the site that I was showing. It's got the ability to log in with Google added to it. So you sign in with Google, you sign in with an ID, and the authentication happens in this case, Google, because I'm signing in with Google, it lets me in, and I'm logged in. If I go take a look at my users, the question that I think Matt was just talking about was that we show this column as an email, which is a bit unfortunate. Our normal registration process is the email is the user ID, but when you sign in with Google, this is the DNN username, and the DNN username is a complex DNN Open Sharp Connect unique identifier that comes in, and so to Matt's question, then, if they've come in through Google, now they have this very complex username, and there's no way for them to be able to sign in directly with a username and password against that. So it's kind of one or the other. Did I get that question right?
Yeah, you did. So in this case, if I wanted to return to this site, not use my Google, I'd be essentially creating a separate profile.
Yeah, that would be one way to do it. So what Patrick and I were talking about was that if there is the ability to change a user ID, one of our actions supports that. So in theory, you could change the user ID to something else and set a password for them, and allow them to start logging in with a password instead. What I think would happen, though, is that if they ended up logging in with Google, then it would flip back to this format.
Mm.
So if they're gonna mix and match, it's kind of a mess.
Right. So basically, you don't try, like you said, you don't try to mix and match. You don't mix the oil and the water. You go with one. That means from a user standpoint, it's incumbent, because I've had this where I've gone into sites and I've logged in with Google and I come back and I'm like, did I create an account here? What did I do? So yeah, you basically you pick your You pick your poison, so to speak.
Yes, and this actually will be an interesting topic as we go along, because we're the vision for this site that I'm showing off here, the login methods, would be to have many different login methods. And so then the question is there, if I offer 5 different ways to sign into the site, is there a nice way to make it where the user gets to pick on any given day? And okay, I'm going to log in with Facebook, I'm going to log in with Google, I'm going to log in with password, and have it all be mix and match. That would be the ideal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. But it's very good. I can see lots of applications for it, and yeah, very good.
It's a nice option to offer if you want to let people in and don't. Another thing that just I'm sorry, I'm brainstorming here now, but if you wanted to allow somebody to log in with their email address, not Google, not through Google, for example, it would be something very easy to build a enter your email address, followed by sending an email to that with a login link. So it would still be secure, and linking to the same user, but it wouldn't be username and password. It would be it would be authenticated by the fact that they have access to their email, and that would work for this kind of solution. Does that make sense?
Yes, indeed it does. In fact, I do the login links all the time. They work great.
So you could just route them back to the same. Wouldn't matter which way they came in. If you had their email address on file, you could let them type an email address, and it's like, if this is on file, you check your email for, we'll send you an email to get you in. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Good options. Mentioned last week, but I'll mention again, we are planning to attend DNN Summit, and you all should too, so we can meet up. That's in February 2025. Mark, anything new on that?
Good idea. No, there's nothing new. We're just getting closer. Looking forward to it.
Probably time for me to actually, I've suggested we are going to be speaking one or two, I think 2 different topics, and so now it's time to fully flesh out the topics that we said we would do. So something for me to be working on.
It's not February yet. Why are you getting started so early?
Exactly. Well, it's because I'm the kind of guy that loses sleep over
That was my
stuff
thought, Mark.
Good for you, Dale. I mean it.
Yes. So last week we talked at length about a thing that was going on with Ben. I don't, since Ben didn't get to come today, we don't know whether it worked out, but Mark, you had put, I think, an interesting possibility to Ben after the session. Did you actually try that out, or was that just hey, maybe this works?
Yes, actually, I tried it out. As a matter of fact, I found that in another entry right there in the community, and it was from me. So I just kind of forwarded what I had written earlier. So I did go ahead and do that again this week. I created a pop-up to an entire page, and it looks and works quite well. And you can close the modal dialog. So I don't remember what the caveats were. I think it's at the database level or something like that. But I used it briefly when I tested it a year plus ago, and I didn't have any problems with it. as far as the data goes.
Good. All right. Well, maybe Ben will report back one of these times whether or not he was able to solve that problem.
And I think that he was. I think he did. Because I think he said it during the afterglow. And the basic and Mark, I apologize, I didn't see what your solution was, but I suspect it probably was this. But if you have a function in place that can close that dialog, you can do window.parent.call that function. And something similar, actually, Dale, that I did earlier this week was the ability from on our build system where you can click that button to open a new tab with the with that you need to go to in order to edit the that exception. That's using that option, because the grid you're looking at is embedded, and so you can't just open a new tab directly from there because it will open up within that same iframe that you're in. But if you do, but what I did was window.parent. And then I called the code to open a new tab.
Right, and I think that's more
Yeah.
on target than I think he
Yeah.
created a global function in JavaScript in order to do it, and of course it works, but yours is more targeted to just the purpose at hand.
I don't know how many of you are signed up on our forum where you can hit the subscribe button and get all the emails, but if you are, you probably saw that there was some spam postings this week. We have some
Oh yeah, I saw those.
Yep.
Yeah,
we
it
have
doesn't
some,
look like that, but yeah.
well, I removed them
Uh-huh.
since, but there were somebody. I mean, I guess I'm glad that it was just trying to financially swindle you out of your money if you were happy to call their 800 number, but as compared to something graphic and completely inappropriate, which we've had, I don't know, gambling things as well in the past. But anyway, it is a challenge when you try to to have a forum and people try and push things through. So, that we have to spend time on throwing out the spam is an annoyance. Anyway, we are using a AI-based is this spam functionality, and obviously we had some problems with it. So some got through. Anybody who signs up new, well, I guess I'm not going to explain the rules, but yeah, we try to slow down the problems. Anyway, sorry about that.
No worries. Everybody gets them all the time anyway. So
Yeah, well, we don't like to be the source of them, right? So here we go. I couldn't. One of our normal features. I think I have this here. Yeah, campfire contributions. So now I can. Now that there's a slide, I can go and do it. Couple of things. I thought for certain that I had put somewhere publicly the JavaScript API, and then I went looking for it and couldn't find it. So we have this. If you know where I put it and want to tell me, I'd be happy to use that. But I wanted to make sure that it was someplace that we could all find it when it's time. So I've added a simple contribution that says that that takes you to this publicly. Here's stuff that's available for those of you that want to do JavaScript, all the API functionality. It's been here for quite a while, but I don't know where I had published the link, so now we have a link published. Did you already have that?
I had stored a link to that. I'm going to go look to see if it goes straight into your docs, or where does it go? But I've been able to get to it myself for a long time.
Yeah, and it's just kind of one of those when I get the question, well, where is the, how do I do this JavaScript to be able to point people to it? It's like now I have to go back and find it myself. So anyway, that one's here. And then this is what's turned into an incomplete contribution, but I put it here anyway. The question was the JavaScript necessary. Now it looks pretty messy, so I'm sorry about that. But the JavaScript necessary to apply a change to a form thing. So this was the original thing. I'll clean this up. I'm sorry, but the idea is that we want to be able to run some JavaScript and have it store value to a field. And the reason that this got so messy is that I found that the code that we originally developed, this functionality, or I say develop, the snippet that you need in JavaScript to push content to TB1 is looks something like this. So whatever value you want to apply, it has to be pushed right onto the form, and then you have to run the apply. This was actually developed for the on-change click functionality.
And just to clarify, what you're talking about here is if you want to push it from outside the form itself. If you're doing it within the form, then it's simpler, right? Just to
good point.
Yeah.
I should clear up all of that. But for example, in this one that says type stuff here, that I have in the bind expressions on change click, that same code, well, made a little bit more generic by the use of module ID. But as you're typing, this will let you push data into the field. Is this what you're saying? There's a better way? You just
within the form itself, you can just use form.fields.fieldname.value. You don't have to do the whole scope thing. That's what I was saying. So, but this is useful for from elsewhere on the page, if you want to push to that very form, then. But
okay.
Unless I'm misunderstanding what you're doing here, but you're just on an on-change click. You're just trying to update the value in another field, right?
Right. So let's the syntax that you're suggesting I should be doing is that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Within the form that will work. Okay, well that might clear things up. The actual question from the user was that he wanted to do this within a button. You're clicking a button and he wanted to run some JavaScript and then make a change to a field. And I found that the syntax that I had would work with a JavaScript and stop, but it wouldn't work with anything else, especially things that involved an Ajax. So, well, unless we have anything more important to talk about, I'm going to actually try your syntax and see if it solves the problem, because I'll have to come back to people with an answer. So,
You're gonna put my name out there.
Gonna give you another option too.
Good. So we'll do JavaScript and continue and say,
if you continue, it's going to reload the page.
I
Okay.
intentionally want to do that. So let's go there. So it'd be form.fields.tb1.value equals, and then we're done. That's all I need, right? And then I want to do an Ajax. So that so this JavaScript impacted, but then the form is still visible. That's the theory. So
okay, I see.
Because they want to be able to push a button and get it to go, and that's the problem.
So why wouldn't the JavaScript and stop execution work?
Let's say they want to do other things with it, like log an entry to an event log. or run some SQL with the result. It's not just about changing the value on the screen, but doing other things with it as well. And what I'm finding in all of these other cases, I don't yet have the syntax that says that it's not surviving the
Ajax.
the Ajax. Or I mean, this I suspect if you know did
Yeah,
more
if you put this
JavaScript,
if you put this into stop execution, then it would work. But you're saying that before, but there's other things. If you did stop execution and that as the last action, would that not work? And did the other things before that, or?
that's a great question. Instead of doing Ajax, let's do JavaScript and
Or you probably also do in a bind expression the JavaScript and return false. But yeah, I think stuff that this accomplishes the same thing.
and
I think I did something similar to this when I was getting the fingerprint on form open. It had to run this, get a value, pop it in, and retain it.
which yeah, okay, I'll go look at that one then too. So that didn't get us there. Versus if we go with now we have a stop, so I'm just going to bring this into this just to see if it works.
I would have to. I mean, I've done that before, so
yeah. So okay, yeah, and I pinged you about this at some point, and you were busy, so we didn't actually get into it.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, that's quite all right. So this is what I guess half a contribution. This stuff will work. Whoops. This stuff will work, as Patrick points out, to put content. We'll clean this up and make it be try and show you how to use JavaScript to push things around in a form in a variety of different ways. But this particular client was trying to do something on the button. We ended up he has a workaround, so we moved it into the on change click. Just as things were happening, he's doing the JavaScript and it's working just fine. So it's not like we're leaving him hanging for an answer, but it still seems like something we be nice to just have a clear. So Mark, I'll take a look at your stuff as well. Thank you for that suggestion.
Check out the chat too. I give you another option for jQuery.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. See, I can't leave it alone. You gave it to me, so now we got to do is
You
this
know,
going to be a JavaScript and continue?
that kind of depends if you want to refresh the form or not.
So this is 1746 PB1. This is what I was hoping for, to be able to Ajax it. 1746, new value here, probably this, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I typically use a class instead of the ID because then I can copy it around.
On a button, it's weird. So we stuff. I have stuff I have to learn, and if I've said it once, I've said it 10 times. JavaScript ain't my first language. Okay, good stuff. So with that, thanks for spending the hour with us. We'll do it again next Friday. And if you have a few more minutes, hang around for Afterglow. We'll continue to enjoy and catch up with each other. All right, see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.